Well, our fabled, beautiful New Mexico autumn is a little slow in coming this year. The summer monsoons seem to still be with us, giving us drought relief, so we're not complaining. But I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to those blue skies and crisp nights and the long, slow descent into winter, which we enjoy here. And even though the calendar year begins in January at midwinter, in our culture, the emotional year starts in the fall. Most of us were formed by school starting in the fall, and many of us have a significant time of living with children who start school in the fall, or we are in school or other kinds of occupations which start up in the fall every year. And so most of us live really not in the calendar year 2013, but in the academic year 2013-14. And this is its beginning. It's the beginning of the Jewish year, too. Rosh Hashanah is next Wednesday, followed by a set of fall holidays focused on atonement and gratitude and making a good start to the new year. And as a church, we're beginning our life with a new sanctuary, beginning a relationship with an intern. We have a new employee and what is a new position for us. And furthermore, La Puerta de los Niños, with whom we have shared our building for nearly 40 years, is starting classes in their new building in the North Valley next Tuesday, and they'll completely have moved out of our RE space in 3 weeks, taking most of the furniture in the RE building with them because there's only room for one set, and they bought it. So that's a lot of beginnings for one little September 1st, isn't it? And in your lives, I would hazard there's a beginning or two. A child gone away to college, a new health concern, a baby on the way. Those are often big beginnings. But it's important to notice and honor the small beginnings, too. A new neighbor, a new way to eat, a new relationship, a new class. I myself am beginning to study Kung Fu this fall, believe it or not, an outgrowth of last fall's discovery of a Tai Chi teacher and a year spent learning that art. What are your new beginnings? New relationships, new resolutions, new attitude? How boring life would be if nothing ever changed. And yet, all those new things, they always involve leaving something behind. In the poem we'll be focusing on later in the service, the poet speaks of looking back on the still smoking campfires from campsites of the past, and he wonders how his heart can be reconciled to its feast of losses. But it is a poem about beginnings, actually, about changes, and about what is often the greatest satisfaction of our lives, our development, our changes, our learnings. Each of these gains, those developments in our lives, leaves something behind. When we moved into this new sanctuary, we left a certain informal coziness behind, right? Besides the coolers that never kept us cool. And we left that particular place which we had always sat, and the memories of those who have sat with us, all the trailing campfires of our life in church. To graduate from high school or college is a great triumph, but it means, of course, leaving behind friends, a life structure, a very sense of self as a student. When you marry, you leave the freedoms of singlehood and often many of your single friends. More trailing campfires. To live in this world, Mary Oliver says, you must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal, to hold it to your bones knowing your whole life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Sometimes, with eagerness or fear or trepidation, we make new beginnings by choice. We retire and move to a new place. We decide to have a baby. We begin a new career or job or school. Sometimes beginnings are foisted on us. Our health situation changes and requires a new set of habits or treatments or a new sense of life's trajectory. Ready or not, those kids do grow up and leave home. After a significant death, we begin life anew without the physical presence of a loved one. Whether we choose our beginnings or not, whether we face them reluctantly or embrace them with gratitude and excitement, beginnings go best if we are intentional about our hopes for them and if we are willing to let go of what is past and from what we must move on. Stanley Kunitz, in the poem we're about to focus on these next few minutes, speaks of both these things. He says that through his changes, he has worked not to stray from the essential person that he is, which is the ultimate intentionality. And he also knows that moving on has involved a feast of losses. We're going to use this poem in a meditative way, coming back to it several times this morning, alternating reading, commenting, and giving you time to contemplate it. Reading and poetry as a spiritual practice is both time-honored and deeply you. It was the major practice of our transcendentalist forebears like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Margaret Fuller. We'll have a go at it today. I'll begin by reading the poem to you. You can follow along. It's in your order of service. I have walked through many lives, some of them my own. And I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I am compelled to look before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling towards the horizon and the slow fires trailing from abandoned campsites over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn, exulting somewhat, with my will intact, to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me. Live in the layers, not on the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes.
What a delight to be here this morning after so many months of anticipating the start of my internship among you. Christine's sermon topic, Beginnings and Endings, is an apt subject in which to embed a brief self-introduction. Thank you, Christine, for the opportunity to do so this morning. Last November, after meeting with Christine and Angela to explore the possibility of serving this internship with you, Christine extended the offer, and I was thrilled. You should know that there are only a couple of dozen congregations in the country that offer full-time internships, and fewer still that are comparable to this church in size, leadership, and support. What a gift you offer our denomination. Thank you for your generosity, and particularly for the opportunity you have afforded me to further my preparation for parish ministry. Today marks a beginning for me, unquestionably. This congregation is also marking a beginning as it resumes worship in a new sanctuary. These events, among many others in our lives, give me pause to consider how we mark beginnings and endings. To declare this new building a beginning, or my arrival as your intern minister as a beginning somehow eclipses the rest of the story. For this congregation, this sanctuary, in all its newness, is as well the ending, the fulfillment of a vision that began as an inspired idea years earlier. Yes? Perhaps it began in the sacred space of the old sanctuary, in the decades of congregational life that you have nurtured among each other. No doubt there are many nuances to the story of the beginning of this new space. That's partly how I feel about the beginning of my internship with you today. Today I am beginning a new role in my vocational journey, yes, but a road that I started a few years back, and I'd like to share a little about that with you this morning. When I moved to Dallas in 1987 and visited the First Unitarian Church, I was heartened to find a place that welcomed me as a gay man, not so common a thing in churches in Dallas in 1987. I hadn't been part of a church for years. I was reared as a Roman Catholic, yet never felt truly engaged by church beyond somber recompense. But as a stranger in a new city, a church seemed theoretically like a natural place in which to find community. In that church, I found gays and lesbians fully integrated into parish life. We served on the board of directors, chaired committees, taught religious education, and preached in the pulpits. I found a congregation that collectively professed its intention to live the principles of our UU movement. People living a commitment to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, acceptance of one another, and encouragement for spiritual growth, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. These principles are great feel-good sound bites, but as any of us who try to live them know, they make for rigorous work. Work that I believe is best done in community like church. So I stayed. Perhaps this has been the experience for some of you who found your way to this church in Albuquerque. For me, maybe that's when the earliest seeds of vocational call to ministry were sown, though it would be a good 15 years later before they germinated. For most of my first career, I worked on public health initiatives related to AIDS prevention, both in public health departments and in a medical university setting. Some of you may recall how our response to the burgeoning AIDS epidemic weighed upon our world with urgency in the 1980s and 90s, a time of real fear and loathing, when we were still learning about cause and transmission, and before life-saving treatment advances emerged in the late 1990s that have since rendered HIV infection a serious but manageable disease, mercifully. My divinity school colleagues helped me see that this first career was, in fact, a kind of ministry, in the way many of us live ministries through our secular vocations. How are you living a ministry in your professional or avocational pursuits? How might your work be enriched by seeing it as a ministry, sourced from our UU principles or your faith? Fear not, most of us who look at our lives through such a lens don't decide to go to divinity school, but I did. I don't have a beginning that I can point to when I first heard my call to ministry. It might have been much easier if I'd had a Moses-like encounter with a burning bush or heard the voice of God on a mountaintop, but I didn't. In contrast, my sense of call came more subtly, best described by the poet May Sarton, where she writes, "Voices do not speak from a cloud, but we are inhabited." It was like that. In 2004, I began the Spiritual Practices Workshop, Living by Heart, with the Reverend Dr. Laurel Hallman, who was then the senior minister of the Dallas Church and now minister emeritus. Laurel and her mentor, the late Reverend Harry Schofield, designed this approach to devotional practice that involves use of poetry and meditation in a way that changed my life and continues to shape my spiritual practice. It brought me to a reconnection with the mystery, the divine. I'm quite comfortable